Kia ora. Hello. This week we are going to look at the medieval city and medieval marriages. I want to look at who could marry, who couldn't, and if medieval people got divorced. Much like the modern world, marriage is a complex situation, so there is plenty here to unpack. I'm Andrew, and this is Populaurbanum, a show where we discuss reenactment and the medieval middle class. First, let's talk about marriage. It has been said that marriage is what brings us together. In the medieval period, what constituted marriage was much different to what we experience today. For us today, the wedding is a whole event. The ceremony and the ritual is key to the day. For us, a wedding has until recently been a religious matter to be conducted by a priest. Was it any different in the medieval period? In the early medieval period, marriage was a secular matter. As a whole, a young woman was taken to the groom's house by her father to be given away, so to speak. As the medieval period continued and Christendom spread through Europe, the church sought to establish domain over marriage and its definition. St. Augustine defined marriage as a physical union. Because of this, it was argued on whether this union was to be consummation or consent. By 1140, canon law established that it was to be mutual consent, and so eventually those of marriageable age, 14 for a boy and 12 for girls, were permitted to perform the sacrament of marriage themselves. As a marriage was made by God, a priest was only required to proclaim his will after the fact. Under this definition of marriage, any Christian man could marry any Christian woman, as long as both were able to freely give consent. Both were of the required age, were not too closely related, and had not taken a vow of chastity, and were not of any major religious order. Young people of the upper class were expected to gain the permission of their parents should their marriage damage any social relations or result in the loss of property. However, if both were of their majority, the parents could not only deny them property if they continued with the marriage. Prior to the marriage, a dowry would only be agreed upon. This was to provide the couple with a kickstart, if you will, and live as an independent unit. This could be money, gifts, or land. Marriage ceremonies could take place anywhere. The bride and groom would wear their best clothes or have new clothing made for the occasion. Brides didn't usually wear white. This was a Victorian tradition. For a couple to be wed, all it took was the swearing of an oath between the bride and the groom. Usually, however, it took place in front of a church. The wedding party would then exchange a gift or dowry. They would then enter the church for communion to receive a blessing from the priest. This was then followed by a celebration by friends and family. Although this was not necessary, as an oath was all that was needed to become married. Secret marriages were a problem, and this was frowned on by the church. In 14th century Champagne, Colin Tanner and Perret Delsot of Villers were cited to appear before the court to answer charges that they had exchanged promises to marry. While the judge was interrogating Perret under oath, she confessed that a month before, Colin had come to her father's house at night and they had talked about a marriage contract. After this, they had exchanged tokens of their affection. Colin did not deny the charges, but admitted that the events had taken place as described. The couple were fined £1 of wax each for the clandestiny and ordered to solemnize their marriage within the week. The percentage of single people in the medieval cities was higher than in the rural areas, yet most people married. In the cities, marriage assured greater wealth as both members of the household could participate in wage labour. Unmarried women were more likely to live in poverty. Marriage also afforded women greater social and legal protection. Women had fewer legal rights. They needed men to make claims for them in court or report crimes against them. An unaccompanied woman without any local males to present charges was highly vulnerable in the medieval legal system. As with modern marriage, medieval people too sought divorce, and not just old Henry VIII. In the early medieval period, much like the marriage ceremony, the divorce process was quite simple. Yet with the increased involvement of the church in the defining of marriage, by the late medieval period, annulment and divorce became harder. For the medieval person, what we would consider divorce to be is different. It would be more likely to be considered as an annulment. In 12th century York, there were 256 cases heard before court. 88 of these dealt with marriage, and of these 45 were dissolution of marriage. Although in Canterbury from 1372 to 1375, only 10 out of every 98 cases were for divorce. It is more likely that should parties no longer wish to live together, they separated without appearing in court. They would live apart legally, but could not remarry. This was referred to as a divorce mensa et thoro. The Ghent shipper Jan Boleyn was married in 1359, and by 1372 had 2 children by his mistress. When Boleyn died in 1382, his will to his bastards was disputed by people claiming to be his wife's heirs. It was revealed that his wife, however, was still alive and well, living so quietly in Bruges that even her own family thought she was dead. Otherwise, the couple could petition the church or local authorities to declare the marriage was invalid. In this case, they could remarry. In 13th century England, a woman could dissolve a marriage upon proof that her husband was unable of meeting her desire to become a mother. Because this type of law allowed for the possibility of a couple conspiring together to obtain a divorce, several forms of proof were required. As the medieval period continued, the required proof became more elaborate. In England during the 14th century, both men and women would often undergo physical inspections should claims of impotence or barrenness be made to the court as a reason for divorce. But divorce was not the only way that people were remarrying. With the high mortality rate of the medieval period, most people who survived into their 40s would most likely have remarried more than once. In medieval society, marriage served many functions, social and economic. For the church, marriage only served the purpose for procreation. For the church, sex outside of wedlock was sinful, and the only purpose for sex was to procreate. For the aristocracy, propertied and mercantile elites, marriage was a way to build social bonds and alliances. For the middle class and workers, marriage was a way to ensure that they were joining their incomes and building their household wealth. That is not to say that people were not marrying for love, but marriage had more importance than mere cohabitation in medieval society. We can see that the church became more interested in not just defining but controlling marriage in the way marriages were conducted through the medieval and modern period. For them, it was not an oath between the bride and groom, but an oath before God, and they felt the need to control that.
Hi, you're still here. That means you enjoyed the video. Remember, like, comment and subscribe. And stay safe, have fun, and keep reenacting.